No, pampered. Pampered. Okay, anyhow, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. We're going to get into some structure of the Constitution, why it was put in place to protect the lawful bloodline natives, dealing with our treaties. And if you're a native, you know what we're talking about, our treaties. And that's the one thing that people need to pay attention to. The Constitution is your friend. Doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not. And that's the one thing that people have to realize. If you're a legal immigrant, you have privileges, but so long as that you're paying the system the way it was designed until you become a lawful bloodline native of your generation being passed down, so that way you're not in the system. Because state and federal income tax is voluntary. And everybody knows that for lawful bloodline natives. We do have the court cases, and we've been sending them out, posting them up, dealing with natives are not to pay taxes, period. And people get wrapped up into this, we have to pay taxes. No, taxes. And we've got this up too. The tax corporation is out of Puerto Rico. They're not American. They're not part of the United States. They're not part of our country. But they are designed to collect taxes from corporations, businesses, interest and dividends, and comprehending what interest and dividends is versus labor. Labor means that when you're doing a job, that's your labor. So you're not required to pay taxes on that labor. You are required to pay interest and dividends on your interest and dividends that are raised off the funding if you reinvest it. That's why I always suggest to people to keep your assets out of your tax structure if you do taxes, and clarify it. People need to realize that, yes, you can clarify things with the tax people and the corporation of the taxes, but learning how to do it properly so that way you don't get, brought in investigations. And that's the one thing that we're out there educating people so that way you can do it on your own, but we're just giving you the ideas, the laws, the information, statute codes, and the federal laws that they have to comply to. And so the reason why the Constitution was put in place, because the Britain government was going around, and remember the Vatican, your religious churches, but it went around back and started doing this about the 13th century, and then it really got hectic in the 15th century, and then in the 17th century when they started coming to this country and putting flags in the soil with Spain and trying to claim this land. You can't go into somebody's house, sit in their chair, take their remote control, say it's my house, get out, or serve me. And that is the one thing that people need to comprehend, that this is the way it works compared to what people think it does. And so when it comes down to this structure, it's comprehending what the truth is compared to what we're led to believe. And most people don't comprehend the truth. They want to go by what they were taught or brought up to believe. I mean, I was the same way when I grew up, definitely. Taught to believe different things, taught to do certain structures. And, like paying taxes, get a traveler's license. Remember, a traveler's license is a voluntary structure. Doesn't matter, and people don't get it. Hang on a second. Gotta take an inhale. My lung medicine. But anyhow, people don't get the Constitution was put in place to protect us. Foreigners came to this country, what we call our forefathers. And when the forefathers came here, they realized that they left England to get away from Christianity and religion. Because in the Christian Crusades and stuff, like they still do today, what the cops are doing is assaulting and murdering people under the Vatican's name. Under Article 1, Section... Article 1 courts. Article 1 courts are legislative administrative courts. That's your House and Senate for each state that passes administrative bills. and realize that you have to realize administrative bills are passed to affect elected and public employees, registered church members, registered voters. That's why I'm not a registered voter, nor do I participate in that at all. I do get people all the time trying to get me back into that system, and I won't do it. Because when you're a registered voter, you are saying that you are responsible and liable for your elected and public employees' debts, their homes, that you'll pay off their homes, you'll pay off their debts, you'll pay them off, supposedly to protect you. That's why the other point is when you get a traffic ticket or something like that, call your representative, because your representative, by law, and I mean by law, he's supposed to represent you in court. They'll tell you they don't, but they lie. You got to remember that these public servants are there to rape, rob, and pillage, some of them. And a lot of them are finally opening their eyes and starting to follow through with their constitutional rights to protect you. I don't vote. I'm not in that system. But the other point is, like Donald Trump has been making a lot of headway, and people don't get it. You'll get conflicting interests or information dealing with people that will attack Donald Trump on things, but they don't do the research. Let's not forget that Donald Trump paid off out of his own pocket 1/4 of the national debt. The national debt is what the British government owns we the people. We the people of this country. They owe us. We don't owe them. The banks went bankrupt in the 1933 Bankruptcy Act. That's called corporations. And so your city, county, and state and part of the federal government are all corporations. And so it's learning the separation of the corporations that gives you your rights, not privileges. And if you're immigration, it has to be to learn your privileges, but know how to stand up where you're not being harassed. Now, I do support the Immigration Act 100%, because these people don't have rights in our country. That's the same thing as coming into your home. But lawful bloodline natives have a right to hunt and fish without being impeded. They have the right to travel without being impeded, harassed, or assaulted. And that's why we do recommend that if you do get assaulted by a public servant, you file criminal charges on them. They're no different than anybody else. But people say, well, hang on a second, we're out of order. People will say that, oh, they protect their own. They do. You can't convict a cop. That's not true. A lot of cops have been being convicted nowadays for assault and trespassing and stuff, but you have to file the charges on them. The Constitution gives you the right to protect your home from the British government or foreign agents of the circumstances of Article 1 court system. Article 1 court system, believe it or not, is run under the Vatican, the churches, the British government. People say, oh, no, I don't. I have the laws. I have the administrative rules, even from the Supreme Court that actually stated this. Supreme Court justices have put this on record that that's where they get their information for and what they have to comply with. So we get this information, lawful, legal, the structure written, so this way you know what the truth is. The point is to educate you to know what your Constitution rights are or privileges are. But nobody has the right to go out and hurt one another, period. Personal property damage. You have the right to protect yourself. Now, there was a court case that I got up that we haven't put on the internet yet. We will. A guy shot 2 police officers protecting his daughter because they wanted to take the kid into custody. And the police officers and the police department's freaking out right now because the district attorney says, oh, we're not pressing charges. You have a right to defend your family at all costs. Preferably that you don't have to get that extreme, but if you have to get that extreme, well, make sure you got people backing you and make sure that you have the rights to do it. And that means that they're really doing it, not what you think. You have to be, when they're physically taking a kid, that's child theft, human trafficking. And remember, when you do file your claims on these public servants, you have to file human trafficking charges on them as well. And even when you get a traffic ticket, that's human trafficking because all your courts across the country are privately owned. The only ones that are owned by we the people are federal court systems and federal court. The only ones that can go to jail for federal court is those who rape, rob, and pillage and commit murder and horrendous crimes. You know, it is good seeing that, you know, they're getting back to responsibility the way it was back before 1937 with the so-called Marijuana Stamp Act, which people don't comprehend that one whatsoever. That only applies to elected and public servants, administrative rules. It does not apply to natives because we even got the Supreme Court decisions and laws. It says, hey, it's your body. You want to kill yourself, go kill yourself. That's why I don't have compassion and sympathy when it comes to drug addicts and alcoholics, because you're supposed to be responsible. Yes, I've been around people and several different type of commercial industries that have done different things like that, you know, and even in the elected and public servants unions and stuff like that. But that's not the issue. It's your body. The Constitution gives you the right to your body. It's like a woman. The Constitution gives her constitutional right to her body. I don't care what these religious people say. Oh, you're a baby. You can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. It's your body. The Constitution gives you the right to your body. Well, if you went with the wrong woman, that's your responsibility. See, people blame others for their problems, their issues. And it's so easy to blame somebody else for what you have caused yourself. It's like people say, to me, I got my neck broken on the job. Not once, twice. Besides being assaulted by cops and everything else that's on the internet where videos are up. But, you know, people say, well, it was your fault. No, I was a bouncer at a nightclub. And, you know, even though that a couple people mentioned to me to get out of that business when I was in another business in the 80s, yeah, of course, you know how it is to listen to people, but I got my neck broken, so I'm not sitting there bitching. I'm pissed off because the private insurance that we had, and not only that, what the business had, now they changed all that to the state incorporation. So the state corporation, when you're disabled, you have no rights. You could even talk to Governor Kate Brown on that. Personally, I know the circumstances. I've dealt with Kate Brown personally since 2006. Now, she says all this stuff is a civil matter. No. Learn the structure of civil. Civil comes by the defeat of the South government that fought for the British government. And it's not a civil matter. It's a criminal matter. That's why I always suggest to people when you get assaulted and stuff, before you even file a claim, you file an affidavit. You have to walk through the injury, explain how it affected you, explain what it cost you. So that's the one thing that most people don't get, that you have to explain what it's cost you. You have to explain the damages. You can't write, and trust me, I write a lot of statute codes and administrative rules that I put out to the general public, even that I'm putting another one out on. It's illegal to shut off your water, electricity, and stuff like that. I'll have that template out, and people can do what they want. You're an adult. I just put this stuff out just to see, you know, if you're willing to educate yourself or not. I mean, I have no actions, and we are not lawyers. We are not attorneys. We're not DAs. We're not anybody in elected and public servants government. And remember, your elected and public servants have an oath of duty to you. And that's in my filings, in a lot of my filings. But they have an authorization to protect you by the Constitution. And when they're not doing it, like Feinstein, Waters, and all these other people that are yelling, and all these illegal congressmen, senators, House representatives from states and Congress, they don't have a right to be in office because the whole structure says you have to be born on the soil. And we're going to get into the 14th Amendment on this, especially deeply on the 14th Amendment when that comes up on a talk show a couple weeks down the road on Sunday night. But the 14th Amendment separates lawful and legal. You have to know the terminology. People say, oh, I have rights. I have rights. You don't even know your rights. How can you sit there and tell a public servant you have rights when you have no concept of what you're talking about? Just because you think you have rights, and I'm saying that word lightly, because you're not doing the research, you're not proving yourself that you have rights. Now, I filed my stuff on my rights, and these guys are fighting tooth and nail trying to keep me in the system because they don't want you to know that you have a right not to be in the system. Doesn't matter what state you are in. You can get out of it. But once you're out of it, remember, you are on your own. The other thing I'm going to touch lately, everybody says, oh, Social Security is a private government agency. Read the real facts. It's a private contract. It's a private insurance contract. And if you actually read Social Security and get the real paperwork that we have published too, that Social Security is a private contract. They are not a government agency whatsoever. The only way they became a quasi-government agency was in 1997 by William Jefferson Clinton, who signed your payee Social Security over to the Queen of England. That was for the employers. Your personal payment that goes into Social Security is not part of the Queen of England, not part of the government. It's a private contract. That's why it's so important when you read private contracts, you read the fine print. And remember, on a private contract, you can always alter it. The party could accept it or not accept it. And that's true. It doesn't matter, At that point, you're in a contract. That's Article 1, Section 10. So knowing how to proceed in these circumstances to protect your bloodline and to protect your family, lawful or legal. Illegals? No, they need to be shipped out. We don't have time for that. We don't have time to feed them because they're expecting 5 billion more coming into the country in the next 20 years. How are you going to feed people? How are you going to have water? See, people don't look at this. They keep thinking the United States has got all this lush land and all this stuff. No, we don't. They have actually butchered our public lands down, cut our forest up. We don't have real acting forest for 1,000 years like we used to because they logged it. And they don't have a right to log this stuff. They have to get permission. And it's interesting because these state senators and congressmen think that they have all the rights. They have the permission. They can do all this stuff. And it's up to you people to start saying no. That's why they're getting away with it. They literally are getting away with it because people are not telling them, hey, here's the Constitution. Here's your employment status. You are supposed to work for us. Do what we tell you. You're not entitled to have free vote. You are supposed to do what the taxpayers tell you, the public servants tell you. And I said a word there on public servants. Public servants do not have that right to tell us anything. They have a right to, do a job called to protect our children when they go to school. That means the state cannot come in because some teacher called and took your kid because they said the kid had a dirty face or because the kid did something that somebody else disagrees with. People do not have this right. I don't have the right to come in and take your child, so why does the state? And by the Ninth Circuit Court, under the Constitution, the Ninth Circuit Court said this year, back in January, that for a child to be taken, there has to be a wet ink signature on the warrant. You cannot do copies of warrants. That is not legal. And not only that, it's not lawful, but it's not legal. And that's the one thing that people have got to comprehend, the structure of lawful and legal compared to what they are thinking, what they are doing. Because in this country, we are not a democracy. We're a republic form of government, not a Republican form of government, a republic form of government. And it's knowing the separation, because if you're using Republican, that's a corporation that was founded with the Democratic Party back with, when did that start? Right after, realistically, after Lincoln's assassination. And that's one thing, people give Lincoln a bad rap, but they don't know what all Lincoln did or what he was doing protecting this country, even though he was an attorney. He wouldn't sell you out to the Queen of England. And that's the one thing that people don't get, that if they actually really done the history or even read the book on Lincoln himself. And I'm talking about the book that was done in the late 1800s that hasn't been altered compared to the history that's been altered today because of school districts and democracy has been altering the school system and coming up with new things saying that they have rights when they don't. See, if you look at Venezuela, look at what's going on in Venezuela right now. They were a democracy, and their country has fallen to the ground. No medical. People are being executed today for even medical issues. And so, until you realize that the Constitution gives you these rights, and let's not forget, the treaties of the Constitution equal and supersede the Constitution, and that's by the Supreme Court and all the filings that have been done. That the one thing is that people are getting this now, slowly getting more and more of this. But until we start making sure that people comprehend and read this stuff, educate themselves, even copy the paperwork and have it on their desk, we do have a structure that I put out on a special police deal that came out with a former public servant officer in Arizona who wrote the structure on what the police can and cannot do. Yeah, he was a cop for 40 years and finally decided to come out with this book after everything he's went through. Of course, he passed about, I think it was in 2014 or 4. But, I mean, this is the one thing, is comprehending what these things are meaning to you. Comprehending how the structure does this stuff. You know, and it's like Rule 1.6 made it illegal for prosecutors and justice in the United States, a law, and everyone's enactment by the Supreme Court. Okay, that means this, if you ever read and would like to read Rule 1 of the government, we have it on our website, but you could always type it in. And this is a constitutional challenge to when they write you traffic tickets, when they harass you or go after your children. And remember, when they go after your children, I always prefer, and I suggest to people, write your affidavits, make sure it's filed on the police department's wall, the county commissioner's wall. Always file all your affidavits with the museum. But remember, if you do write an affidavit, you are liable. If you lie in that affidavit, you can go to prison. Don't do that. Make sure it's factual information. Do not put emotions and feelings in it. Okay? And that's the one thing a lot of people, oh, my feelers were hurt. No, you cannot do that. This is not an emotional game. We have to go stick with the facts. What was that? Dragnet. Only the facts. Joe Friday would always say, just the facts, ma'am, only the facts. So the district attorney or attorney general to prosecute the crime, because it would affect the intelligence or the integrity of justice, would reveal, prosecute misconduct on their own office, and would expose the individual liability. See, that's the one thing they don't want you to know. When they sit there and you've been assaulted and they tell you it's a civil case, it's not a civil case. And it's not even a civil case if you're an immigrant legally here. If you're legally, it's still an assault on you. You can still charge them with the crimes. And that's the one thing, legal or illegal or lawful, you have to charge them with the crimes. A district attorney, a state attorney general, a judge, a cop cannot write an affidavit. They don't exist. There are, what they call an inanimate object, because when you use the word person, you're an inanimate object. You're not a living man or woman or child. And so it is so apparently that when you write your affidavits and put this information out, that you have to be writing it 100% from lawful or legal in the Constitution, and you have rights at that point. Even legal immigrants could end up with rights on that, because if they were assaulted and, threatened and anything like that, that's still criminal activity, lawful or legal. And so when we look at this and we start realizing that the lawyers have no jurisdiction, because the lawyers work for the courts, we all know that. They don't have authority unless you sign a contract with them. Because if you sign a contract with them or you have a judge point you a public pretender, then you are saying that you have no constitutional right and you're a ward of the court. You're nothing more than a little baby child screaming for help, and a baby child needs to have somebody else represent it. So you're not an adult, so you cannot represent yourself. And so this is the one thing that when we start doing these investigations and we start reading this stuff out and producing this stuff not only for ourselves but for others, you have to realize your knowledge and education on these things. And that is the one thing that when you go into court, you want to set yourself up to get into court of equity. And we're working on that one right now, so that way we can put that up eventually with no conflicts. Because if you are a lawful native, you have to go in a court of equity. That's the only court that you are allowed to be in. And that is the one thing that you have to realize, that as a lawful native, you have a responsibility to go by the Constitution called the peace flag. The flag that they're flying today, that everybody thinks that, the 50-state flag that you're flying on their property today, that's called a war flag. That's the American war flag. So who are you guys warring on? I mean, that's you got to think about it. Who are you warring on flying that flag? How come people are not flying more and more of the peace flag? The one thing, too, is when you go into these courtrooms, you leave your constitutional rights at the door when you accept their terms by walking in the door. If you have to go in, always carry a peace flag with you. You're going under peace. You're not going under wartime. That's why the gold fringe flag is there. That's the wartime flag that's in the courts. They're waging war on you. And so once you start realizing how your court systems work compared to what you're taught to believe, and when it comes down to, let's say, 18 U.S.C. 241, and we know what that is, your rights, but you have to file that right. And that's under Admiralty Jurisdiction 28 U.S.C. 1333. And when you file your criminal complaint, they have pages that you can do criminal complaints, but if you're able to cut, paste that, and redo it on your writing on your computer, you want to use you could use their form, leave the criminal complaints, but then you put that in brackets, and then by that you put your affidavit of injuries. So you have to spell this stuff out. People go, well, the judge is supposed to know this. The judge is supposed to know that. He already knows this, but when you go in and you're not filing correctly, hey, you're giving him the rights to make more money off you. You're giving the rights for the sheriff deputy. And, of course, the sheriffs are only supposed to be in the courtroom. They're not supposed to be on the street, technically. And that's been decided, and we do have that court case, too, where I forgot what state it is, but the court came out and said that sheriffs have no arresting authority. And so you have to realize and learn the structure of your system, lawfully, bloodline native, or legal citizen. And I watch these people all the time on talk shows and Facebook that sends me these videos to watch, and everybody starts off citizen rights and citizen this. Why are you using citizen? You have to know the difference of a large C citizen when the 14th Amendment changed it compared to the small C citizen corporation where they still put you in slavery. And once you realize that you are still put in slavery, then you have a little bit more structure of how to defend yourself to get out of that slavery. And that's like the State of Bar Association. That's why everybody should challenge when they go to court. And that is 22 U.S.C. 611 as a foreign agent. All judges are lawfully, not legally, lawfully required by 28 U.S.C. 372 to have a registered certified oath on office on record. And that's the one thing when you go to a courtroom, and if you're trying to get an oath of office, ask the clerk to certify it and register it for you. Now you have ammunition. It's like a good friend of mine that always says to people, everybody goes, I have a right to travel. Who gives you the right? Well, we have these rights. Well, do you have it by a senator, House of Representative? Did you get a certified mail on it? Did you get a record that says that you have this right? This is how they pull the wool over our eyes. And it's all a game to these men and women because that's how they make their living, rape, robbing, and putting us in alleged further debt But once you realize the debt is by the British government, because the banks went bankrupt in 1933, you, the bloodline natives, never went bankrupt. But they want to convince you when they started doing income tax and all that in 1940. And it wasn't until 1980 when it really got pressed out to the general public. And remember, that's 1980. That's only 40 years ago. See, prior to that, not everybody paid taxes. This is why we had the Civil War, because the North was not going to pay taxes, excise fees, income taxes, state taxes, any taxes. That's why we went to war. We weren't going to sit there, and that's why the Constitution says that you have the right of free religion. Does not mean the right that you have to realistically able to stand on the street corner where people will get these, people are out there yelling Jesus Christ and stuff, and then people are getting upset because they're getting arrested for the free speech rights. Well, yeah, they have a free speech right, but not to push their religion and beliefs onto another living man, woman, or child. Your belief is your belief, not my belief, because my religion is the Constitution. That's what I go by, the Constitution. That's my religion. I don't believe in book and fairy tales. I don't believe in Christmas. Christmas was founded in 1841 by Macy's department store in England. And this is the one thing that people need to realize, where this stuff comes from compared to what we think it comes from. And once we start comprehending it and realizing this and how we're standing up for our rights, that's how we're going to sit there and do these things, to stand up, to protect the children, to educate the children. That is your and my responsibility, not the school district, because the school districts have been failing since 1978. 10 years after the school board administration was put in place federally, 1938. And remember, all this stuff is new. All this stuff is coming up where people don't get it. They don't get what's going on in our country. And that is the one thing that once you start realizing what your responsibility is to your bloodline, native or immigration. See, it doesn't matter if you're lawful or legal when it comes to that, because when you're an immigrant, you took an oath to the Constitution to be in our country, to follow our laws. Our religion is the Constitution primarily, and that follows with the treaties of the natives. And the treaties of the natives were written to protect the native. And also, too, yes, the British are still invading. I mean, come on, look at Britain's Got Talent. Look at all your late-night talk shows today. All of them are for Canada or England. I haven't seen one talk show host from America yet. I haven't seen that in 15 years. All of them been transferred to, what do they call that? British government. So the British government is still influencing you how to live. They're trying to teach you how to preach and go through their Bible. Okay? Now, there's literally probably thousands of religions out there, not just Christianity or Muslim, but people want you to believe in this stuff. And if we go back in history, look at how Christianity and Muslim were once together until they separated. That goes back to the Christian Crusades. That's why Thomason, former president, Jefferson Thomas, put the structure in that's clearly stated. That's why the Marines and the Navy was formed, to protect us from Muslim invasion. Remember, if you do your history, you'll see how the Muslims were, why they were not being allowed in this country, and including when they revised the Immigration Act in 1952. And people go, oh, it's religion. The Constitution says they have free religion rights. Yeah, in their country. You don't have a right to come into our country and preach your religion and put it through our House and Senate and tell us this is your law and this is the way it works. Hell no. You're in our country, our 48 states. You don't have a right to dictate on the street corner of your religion, just like nobody else, no Christian, has the right to do the same. I mean, technically, the televangelist stuff on TV technically is a criminal offense. But they get people raped in and ripped in and talked in, and then they send all their money out or turn their land and houses over. If you're smart, if you have no one to leave it to, write your assets so that way it goes to a lawful bloodline native. And if it doesn't go to it, it doesn't go to it. The state can't claim it. Because remember, a corporation cannot claim private assets unless you allow them. That's like if you're getting evicted from your property for not paying property taxes. I can't do that. I got another one I'm writing on that because I'm still dealing with that myself. And so that is the one thing, I mean, when you're on disability, you don't have this extra income that people think you do. And then people think, oh, they have these structure that you have these programs to help the disabled. I don't know where you people come up with this lie. I know you get it from the Democrats and Republicans. And, they sit there and tell you have all this, but you don't. They don't care about you. And if you look at most of the elected and public employees, they've got generations into this stuff. They're not all just new generation hired. Most of their family has been in this structure for, 200 years. That's how they got their income. That's how they got their wealth. So the whole thing is participating in education of your Constitution, your administrative rules, and knowing the structure of how to file when your rights are violated, lawful or legal. And so once people start really comprehending the lawful and legal structure on these things, you end up freeing yourself. You end up freeing your children. You actually end up owning your child. That's why we do have on New.Oregon Trackers website how to own your child. Read it. Claim your bloodline. By law, when your child is birthed, as they call it, but born. But they call it birth, so that way it's birth, so that way that goes to a ship structure. So if an abandoned ship is not claimed in 30 days, the state claims it. The state attorney general for each state does. That's the same thing as a ship being claimed out by pirates or even any government or any private individual that's on the ocean, And then we're talking ocean. Inland is not the ocean. And they'll have you going, wow, inland, the sheriffs have this authority. They can take your boats. No, they cannot. But see, the point is trying to educate people so we can start doing this collectively so that way we're not going through this hassle, headache, where they're draining us from the inside out, called democracy. And remember, democracy is founded by the Christian government, the British government, and religions. And remember, as a religion, if you're not registered in the country as a religion, you don't get tax breaks. That's why, I don't pay that stuff. And I'm an ordained minister. And anybody could be an ordained minister. There's no structure or schooling when it really comes down to it. All you do is file your paperwork. Oh, you file it. You're accepted. Now you're who you claim you want to be because you're claiming under the Constitution, under Congress, a title of nobility. But see, I don't believe in title nobilities myself. I'm not a nobleman when it comes down to it. I'm an honorable man. I'm an honest man. And if you look at the up in the dictionary what nobleman means, you'll see the difference. Or a noble title. And this is the one thing that people don't get. It's like everybody's panicking in parts of England right now because of the Queen dies. Who's going to take over the country and who's going to run it and how it's going to be changed? Now, people in England are waking up. I mean, in England right now, they're outlawing kitchen knives. And that's the one thing, out of 390 million people in this country, and we have to say at least 60% of those people in this country since 1890s came from another country. But after 1933, the Immigration Act that put in with Ellis Island, prior to that, you had rights. And then when you come in this country and register, you give up. Well, of course, you don't have rights anyways. You have to file. You have to pay the system, our system, because that's what the British government owes us. That's under the IRS administrative rules if you actually read it, the entirety of it. Don't skip through it, and that's the one thing I do recommend a video called Theft by Deception on YouTube. It explains that labor laws, because under labor, you're not to pay taxes. Because that's between you and the individual, male or female, of your contract, even verbal contract. That's not a taxable structure. Just because you say words doesn't mean your words can be taxed, but that's what the elected and public employees are trying to do right now. I don't see how people do not see the connections with religion organizations trying to take over this country to teach you this is the one religion you have to go by, or this is one religion that you should believe in. You know, religion is a personal belief. As it says, separation of church and state. 100%. And you get people out there all the time, they're going, oh, Christianity should be the structure that runs this country. And then you got Muslims saying it, you got Baptists saying it. We don't want your religion in this country. That's what our forefathers fought. Native forefathers, you know, the Indians, natives. And remember, natives is not just Indians. Read your real history. But we get taught this because, see, if we can still have the Indians fighting against us or having them not learning their proper education, which I am proud to say we do got some natives out there that have filed their rights, getting it, realize what the structure is, and standing up for themselves, but trying to get the other ones to do it because it's like when it comes down to the American Bureau of Information, the American Indian Bureau, it doesn't work for the public. I've dealt with them with other natives that have been kidnapped and held for ransom. And saying you have to pay the privilege to eat in, like in our state of Oregon corporation, are telling children that if you don't have a license at 12 years old, you can't feed yourself. It's a crime to have breath. It's a crime to have water. It's a crime to have life. And that's what your elected and public employees are doing through religion right now to you, telling you it's a crime to live. And it's a fact. It's not a joke. Come on. I mean, most of us know it. Most of us see it. Most of us have read about it. Most of us have been involved in it. But once we start utilizing and uniting the 48 states back, which is slowly happening, I wish it would happen 10 times faster than what's happening right now today, realistically, honestly. But that's going to take some time for more and more people to comprehend the reality of the truth that they're living in fantasy land. It's like everybody knows Christmas was made up. Everybody knows Christmas is not real. How many children, when they become, what, on the average of probably 7, 9, 10, realize that there's no Christmas? Mommy and daddy, friends, neighbors, business owners, buy them Christmas presents. Make sure they have something for what they do. And Christmas is another fraud. Even though the kid says that was not good all year long. And if you don't give a kid Christmas present, you'll have psychologists telling you, oh, you're mentally mind controlling your kid to screw them up because you're not giving them like if everybody else gets a present or a gift, your kids should get the same. Well, that's the point. That's up to the parent, not guilt, not religion. And by the way, most parents really can't afford Christmas because they have to put on a credit card, so they buy their clothes, shoes, and clothes. And then the school district back in 1980 started eliminating paper and pencils and pens in the schools because, oh, the teachers needed more money to party on. And don't let your teachers lie. They do get paid very well. They really do get paid very well. Don't let them lie to you. And the average structure of the law says that public employees are to make 2/3 of the average wage earner, not above them. And that didn't happen, start taking effect until after, I believe it was Jefferson. William Clinton was the one who started tripling and doubling people's pay raises. And if you do type up William Jefferson Clinton, type in William Jefferson Clinton voting machines, you'll see that they bought the voting machines so they could alter your votes. So does your vote really count? Think about it. see, that's the one thing. Everybody says, oh, you have a right to vote, but if you go back to the 1870s, most people didn't even vote. They never even have a clue of voting unless you were in the city limits, what they called back then. But see, when it came to voting, or outside the county, further out, people didn't even know about that type of stuff. But the one thing that comes into it, that the only ones that were allowed to vote were landowners. And then you hear women, you hear these organizations yelling and screaming, the women don't have a right to vote. Well, when a woman was the landowner, she had the right to vote. But they don't tell you the real history. They don't tell you the truth. They want to keep you arguing and fighting. It's like abortions. Who the hell cares what somebody else does in their own life so long as it didn't personally harm you and didn't do personal property damage? How come everybody's got to shove their nose into somebody else's business? Tell them how to live, to dictate. Oh, you didn't do this. I'm going to call the cops on you. That's like the lady in San Francisco calling the police department on an 8-year-old child because she didn't have a permit to sell water. I mean, you don't need a license or a permit to do, but you don't even need a permit if you own private land to build on it. That's a fact. I've done it, proven it. So it's like when these people tell you you have to do this, and that poor lady, and I'll say poor lady because she got attacked heavily by the media and a lot of other people for calling the city of San Francisco Police Department on the child for selling bottled water. And people, well, it doesn't really matter what she was doing it for. She was trying to raise the money to go to Disneyland because their parents didn't have the income and that type of stuff, so they're trying to figure out a way to go to Disneyland. Well, to me, you know, if people want to go to that, that's up to them, but I wouldn't waste my money there. I'd much rather, you know, help people out, you know, than do that. I mean, because other people need help better than Disneyland does. But remember, Disneyland is a fairy tale story. So it's not being negative on Disneyland. They have a corporation right to do businesses. You have a right to go spend your Federal Reserve notes the way you want. Remember, Federal Reserve notes are not money. They are an IOU debt. And that's continuing the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, because every time you see the so-called national debt, remember, national is British, not American. And, you know, everybody goes, well, I'm a national American. Okay, well, if you want to be a British subject, go ahead. Because Executive Order 2040 says all nationals and all citizens are enemy to the natives, to we the people in the country. Read Executive Order. I mean, it's a fact. See, people don't realize that when they put these administrative rules in, they put them to protect the natives as well as to protect them, their employment. Because under the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, the only ones that were able to get what they call Federal Reserve notes for exchange were elected and public servants. That's how they were to be paid. And so that exchange goes through that other stuff. And that's why when you see a lot of people today, you know, using credit cards and all this stuff, they don't have a right per se. They do if they file the contract correctly. But they don't if they don't file a contract with them. Once you click in and you say it's okay and you don't sit there and claim your rights to that okay, you agree to their terminology. And that's what's horrifying today, because people don't realize what they are really doing to themselves today about their constitutional rights or privileges. And so once the Native Americans start educating the immigrants and the immigrants start educating the natives, and forget the illegals. I agree, the illegals should be shipped out. I don't give a damn what country you come from. I don't care what God you believe in. Our country was not set up for invasion and terrorist activities from corporations or from other people coming in our country. Now, I could see asylum on a few people, but realistically, no. I mean, they did that to the Germans, and look what that did to us in this country. Johnson & Johnson products were founded by Nazi Germany. I mean, I don't realize how, or see how people don't realize or see this stuff, but they don't do the research. They see a name and they don't research things. They don't research what the consequences are. I mean, that's why when people sign an IRS statement under perjury, and I mean, I watch people even write even in their instruments, Oh, I say this under perjury. Who the hell are you to violate your Fifth Amendment rights? Oh, that's right. You probably don't even know the Fifth Amendment, and you probably never heard of it, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow night. But see, when you sit there and self-criminate yourself is what you're doing. You never sign or autograph anything under perjury, because now you just turned your body, soul, and life over to that corporation, and you have no rights. If they murder you, rape, stab you, whatever they want to do to you, because you gave them permission. And that's what you do when you do that, even though legally and lawfully it's not supposed to happen, but it happens. You're signing a contract with these men and women. That's like when DHS comes out to you and says, well, we want to see your child. Hey, get the hell out of here. I got a couple of videos I posted on Facebook here recently on the 4 Facebook channels we have. You know, and we got the cops were trying to come in and take her kids with the caseworker, and she basically used a lot of profanity, and people say, well, she shouldn't do that. I don't give a damn what you think about that, because I don't like swearing myself, but there are people that do it, and that's called freedom of speech. You're not entitled to tell somebody else how to talk. And if you don't like it, don't deal with them. Don't be around them. See, that's called your responsibility. Not only that, your responsibility to educate your children that way. You know, I don't believe in giving the guilt of some type of Bible or something like that. You have to explain to a kid, because a kid, you know, after 7 years old, they do comprehend this stuff. They do know what you're talking about. They're not that stupid like psychologists try to play out to the general public. And that's the one thing that you have to realize, that these psychologists and stuff are corporation men and women. They are not for you. You know, and then once you sign yourself over to a psychiatrist and stuff, and especially if you end up in court with a psychiatrist, you know, some have worked out where the psychiatrist backed them up and said they weren't crazy, lunatic, or something like that. But most of them will say that they have this problem or that problem. And then that's entered in the court record, and that is to be used against you in a court of law. And they do use it against people in a court of law. I mean, people will sit there and go, well, I told the cops the truth. You didn't tell the cops the truth. Because when you go to court, the cop will change that and said, well, you said this. And it's like a perfect example for a guy who assaulted a woman, and the woman was going to court, and the cop went into court, and a pretender public servant, prosecutor, asked that lady what happened. She told him, and then the cop was put on the stand. And so it was interesting, and I got the video, and it's interesting because the cop was asking, the public pretender was asking, or the public prosecutor was asking the cop, well, did he ever mention that he didn't like her or had any emotions or feeling against her? Oh, yeah, he said he didn't like her. And so what is the jury here? One woman saying that the guy assaulted her. You got a cop, that number 2 witness is telling the jury that, yeah, he didn't like her, didn't get into anything else of what was said, because the guy goes, I told him the truth. That truth is to be used against you in a court of law, even though it might be a statute administrative court of Article 1. But now you got 2 people going against you, and, you know, and what does the jury hear? This guy's an asshole. He hurts the women. So it's stepping out and analyzing things which you think it is, or which you know it is, compared to what you're using. So that's why I always suggest, you know, when you're writing your cases up, and people say, well, you shouldn't use their administrative rules because they're copyrighted. You should use their administrative rules as a reference what they have to go by. They copyright it. That's like a traffic ticket. It's an insurance bond when they hand you a traffic ticket. That's why you can actually take it to the Secretary of State and the Treasury and get paid for it. And then the cop has to pay for that out of his pocket. But they're going to lie to you, and they're going to try to squiggle out of it, and they're going to tell you, I don't know what you're talking about. But they know it. They don't want people to know what the facts are. And that's what we're going through with the separation. dealing with lawful and legal, and the Constitution was founded to protect us from the religious people and the British government, any foreign government. It was put into place so that way you had the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so happiness doesn't mean being entrapped by religion. It means you go out and hunt and fish, travel, sit on the river, enjoy the sun, go to the beach, and enjoy life without being harassed. And so our forefathers have put this in place. Remember, your forefathers came from two major countries, England and Spain. I mean, even the Spaniards have been trying to take claim to California as Mexico is, and we have these contracts going back to the 1600s. You don't have no contracts because the natives never agreed to anything, because all those treaties that were done by foreign countries were done by foreign countries on United States 48 state soil. They didn't have the authority by the native people to have those contracts, but they're trying to still, some of them are trying to still enforce them, and some of them have been enforcing them today. And of course, have been enforcing them under international law of 1963. And that's the one thing, international law has no place in this country. International law is corporation laws for corporations, not you and I. There are people that are going through that in their court stuff, and I'm waiting to see the real court structures of how they won in it that gave them their rights, not privileges. See, there is this total separation of lawful and legal. There is a total separation of universal commercial codes. There is a total separation of statute codes and administrations. And so it's knowing the separation of our system that we are not educated and taught in this structure. The only way most people get it is, all right, you go to a law school, you get taught this structure. Yeah, it's like, I thought I was going to go into law enforcement until I realized what the truth of that was. But see, we get taught these things. And so that's the point that, you have to do your research. And that's the one thing I do have to say, that at least on our website and the stuff that we do, is that we're educating people on the structure that lawyers and attorneys and judges and others don't want you to know. And we don't care about what they want. That's the point. I'm not here to please them. I'm here to save or to educate lawful and native. I'm here to educate legal immigration if they want to be, which we are doing too. But that's the one thing. When you come into somebody's home, you don't have the right to put your flag in and claim it as yours. And that's what people are doing today, called democracy and the Republican Party, and telling you to fly the war flag of the American government. Remember, the flag that you see that everybody flies on the structure, that's American government. That is not the peace flag. That is not the Constitution flag. That doesn't give you rights with that war flag. Because that war flag, when you walk into a courtroom, as I have from the military of Oregon, says that you leave your rights at the door. So it's knowing what your rights are versus privileges, and knowing how to defend yourself. And even legal immigration has a right that if a public servant assaults them, you have to write the criminal charges. And everybody, even lawful bloodline native and legal citizens, when they go to district attorney to do all this stuff and to file charges, they can't. We've even got the law, and it's been confirmed too, that they're artificial identity. They're a person. Persons don't exist. They're not real. They're imaginary. Yeah, I mean, I argue with people all the time about persons on the internet. I've had many conversations with them. I've argued with people even on their own talk shows. And I say, show me the definition of person that says you have rights. Well, it was used back in the 1700s, by lawyers. And the Black Law Dictionary was written as a joke to begin with in the 13th century. And people didn't get that. They were still amazed that people are using it today. And the Bouvier Dictionary was written basically as a joke. And then they started doing it so that way, now we got to produce lawful and legal in this structure. Because remember, when the Black Law Dictionary was originally written before the 1700s, it was all Vatican and England law. And people say, well, you have rights under the Magna Carta. Well, you do to a degree. Magna Carta is British law, American government. British government. But they have adapted it in the court system because some people, you have the right to be free. And that's what, free from the king. Or today in England, the queen, but free from the king structure. And so it is, working these things out, working with each other, educating each other, especially the children. If you start out at least an hour a day when your kids get home from school, make sure something like this is in their homework assignments. It's your responsibility to educate your children, not the school district. The school district is a playhouse. School system hasn't really educated any of the kids since 1950. Because when the boom happened after World War II, everybody got away from reality. Oh, we got all this money. We have all this things so we could buy and go out and do these things. And even in the 1950s, people were still living in the woods. We're not all in the city structure. There were people still never used what they call de facto debt notes or whatever. They barter and trade. Barter and trade cannot be taxed at all, period. End of story. They know that. Even when you read the tax code, it even says barter and trade cannot be taxed. Even interest and dividends on barter and trade, because there is no interest and dividends in the IRS system on barter and trade. Because when you barter or trade with somebody, you're giving somebody that in exchange for whatever, and we know how that works. We grew up. Even kids that were growing up, we used to barter and trade marbles, comic books, other things. So it is stuff that, once we get to some of these knowledge that we forget when we were growing up as children, and most of us do forget because we get wrapped up in the commercial industries without realizing the commercial side of the commercial industries, or even commercial laws, universal commercial codes. So it is valid to step out of the movie, watch the production, and like we do recommend all the time, is a movie called Interstate 60. Please watch it. It does explain most of your court systems. That's a heck of a good movie. It's well done, and, we got some other stuff. And then next Saturday, I got a couple videos that are going to be about total, I think, 16 minutes total. One of them is going to be 14, let's just say 15 minutes, and I got another one that's 6 minutes. So we'll break that up during next week. But the one that I really want to play next week, too, is on the 14th Amendment, because I want to get that played a few times before we get into the 14th Amendment on Sunday. Tomorrow's the 5th, so, we're talking 9 more weeks down the road. So we want to get some people to start thinking about this. It's like tomorrow night is very important for those who want to know the Fifth Amendment. Learn to keep your mouth shut. When a cop tells you to keep your mouth shut, keep your mouth shut. You're not helping yourself when you sit there, I'm going to tell the cop because I've been taught to tell the truth because I was raised by religion that says honesty is the best policy. You screw yourself each and every time. I agree, honesty is the best policy. I agree with being honorable, but not to elected and public employees when they're sitting there and going to use that against you in their administrative rules or court of law. And remember, CPS cannot file case law against you unless a judge has issued a warrant autographed. Because all they're doing is harassing you and putting you under duress. And remember, you want to look that up in the law dictionary, the word duress. It's like I've been in the hospital several times, died a few times in the hospital. They come in and want you to sign the paperwork. I can't sign that. I'm under duress. And, and what do? They leave. Say that to a cop, pulls you over. I'm under duress now. I can't talk. I'm under duress. See, and also, too, some of these public employees will take silence as consent. And that's part of their administrative rules, but there are laws against that. But when you be silent and not speaking up to defend yourself, this is why our problems happen the way they do. Everybody says, well, I have to be honorable, honest. Yes, we all do. But when it comes to elected and public employees, they're not there for you. That's not their job to protect you. Even though that they're supposed to protect you, that's one of the laws that we have up. 5 CFR, they have a Constitution obligation. And we do have, and I would like to thank those elected and public employees who are honoring their oath of servitude. And that's what it is, servitude to we the people. That's how they get that de facto dollar. So that way they can buy their groceries and buy land. And the other thing is that public servants need to comprehend and realize that once you are out of the service and you retire, you can separate yourself as long as you're a lawful bloodline native. If you're an immigrant, that's a totally different story. But if you're a lawful bloodline native, you know, you can deregulate yourself. You earned your retirement. You earned your structure that is obligated to you by the corporation for your time of service. And so it really does come down to these things, of how these things work, how these things do it. But you have to read. You have to educate yourself. Your public servants, some of them are very honorable. I've met quite a few honorable elected and public servants, you know, including honorable cops. I've been pulled over before in the past where, you know, a cop comes up, hey, what do you want? How can I help you? I need your license and registration. Show me the law that says you do. Oh, by the way, can I get your police manual? By law, you have to hand me your police manual over. And most of the time, they just get in their car and drive away, because they know they're dealing with somebody that don't know. And I mean, I watch videos where people say, I'm an attorney, I'm a lawyer. You're part of de facto. You have no rights. I watched attorneys saying this on their programs. I watched attorneys that use this on YouTube videos. That's bullshit. Because lawyers and attorneys work for the corporation. I haven't seen one yet that's been honorable that took their case to the Supreme Court and fought it. When I do, I will change my opinion and I will talk about that case and bring it out to the general public. But we need to see honorable people. You know, not titles of nobility. That's what the queen does when she puts a sword across your shoulders. You know, he's swearing you into their corporation. So just take a step out of the movie, watch a few things, look at some things, do some research. Like I said, our website is new.org and trackers. We have a lot of lawful and legal information, educational information. We have education videos up there for you. We are working on a homeschooling page for children, and we've got some stuff that was taking us some time because there's not a lot of us doing this. And, of course, we don't have the resources like a lot of these corporations do going out there and doing this stuff because we just don't have it. You know, I mean, we're not out there selling T-shirts or selling products, which we are considering of putting up a site. We're going to have to put up a side site for a few things like that. But we don't want it connected, you know, we'll have it, you know, Oregon Trackers 2 or something like that. We'll come up with a side deal. But that's what, you know, all these other people that have done. But see, that's the one thing I try to stay away from, because then that way you cannot be drugged in. But there are ways to legally protect yourself on it too. Legally protect yourself. And that follows under the constitutional law. Because like it says, and we've got the laws that says Indians and natives cannot be taxed. So it's knowing how to file your paperwork. But the main thing I want to stress to you, do never, never say under perjury in any paperwork you do. Because if you put under perjury and they're able to squirm something out of that word in your paperwork, you're going to jail. Or you're going to do a plea bargain. Simple. Protect your Fifth Amendment rights. Your first, second, third, actually all of them. Technically, there's only 10 real amendments. We had 2 afterwards, and that was 10, 12. But everything after the 12 administrative rules are all administrative rules after the 12. So it is separating the structure, knowing why they put the administrative rules to protect the lawful and legal And that's the best that we're doing is we are learning and educating ourselves on this stuff. So that way your children know what freedom is. And you get to learn what real freedom is. It's like, why do people pay income tax? Because they don't know the law. They don't read the tax code. They go by what somebody tells them to do. I mean, it's like your mommy and daddy when you grew up, they told you, you need a driver's license. You need a business license. I've had businesses. I never had a business license. When I was a bodyguard back in the 80s, until the 1990s when my neck got broken. 89 is when my neck got broken. I had a umbrella package for insurance, and then when I got my neck broken, they ran out on that. We don't have to pay. Then they wanted to go through their attorneys and stuff, and then I went through the workman's comp system and got screwed around by that because in 1990, 94 is when they put the workman's comp system in my state territory of Oregon, corporation state, and other states put that in too as well. And people need to realize what the lawful and legal differences are. See, they were saying out to the general public on workman's comp and to the general public, all these people got lump sum settlements. They blew it, so they ended up on welfare. With a lie. They got pissed off because some of these people got lump settlements. Instead of going out and blowing it, they bought businesses. They got a restaurant. They got something that they could produce a living off, so that way they had their medical insurance covered. And most of those men and women who did that, most of them, with their employees, all had 100% medical and dental until they started changing the structure and putting people against each other. So realize when you're watching these House and Senate votes and you're watching TV about what's going on in Congress and stuff, realize, are they working for you or not? That is your responsibility to know if they're working for you or not. And once you comprehend the law compared to statute codes and administrative rules, now you've beaten the game. And the main thing is when somebody gets terminally ill, it's like the other point is like if you're in a different profession and you really get injured on a job, that's why some of these corporations have their best insurance policies and packages for their insurance. Depends on what industry you're in. But that's the one thing you got to pay attention to the industry you're in and what your lawful and legal rights are. Even immigrants, when they get hurt or not, have to know that. That's the one thing that, to know this structure. That's why attorneys sit there and play these games. And people say, well, attorneys are supposed to be educated and know all this stuff. Well, no, not exactly. Some attorneys prefer certain professions of what they call their law. And remember, statute codes and administrative rules elected and public employees call law, which ain't real law. That's only statute codes and administrative rules that apply to elected and public servants, registered church members, registered voters, and all immigrants. And people say, well, Ed, what do you mean by registered church member? You go to church. When you register, when you put in into the coffers of the church and you put a check in and that stuff, you think it's not registered? See, that's what stuns me, how people short-sight themselves, short-sight their own knowledge and education, and they don't think about these things. And that's the one thing that we got to stop these immigrants from getting money and income out of our, what they call taxes. And also, too, if you do pay a traffic fine or something like that, please file a 1099 on the court system every time. You want an audit by the IRS on them because there are courts that have been closed down permanently for not paying their taxes because by mandatory law, they have to pay it. If, ands, or buts don't exist for them. It's a reality. And I'm going to bring this up before we open up the floor to the general public here again, but the United States Court, there is no jurisdiction. There is no judicial courts in America, and there hasn't been. Oh, hang on, I got to put it up. Seen it came up. Let me go back here. Yeah. Anyhow, there is no judicial courts in America. There hasn't been since 1789. Judges do not enforce statute codes and executive administration. Enforce statute codes They are not. They have not been any judges in America since 1789. And that's the one thing that people need to read this. This is FRC versus GE, General Electric, 281 USC 464. Keller versus PE is the other one, 261 United States, 4281 Stat 13878. We do have this up. If you send me messages and stuff, I'll pass this stuff on to you. Anyhow, let's open up the floor and we'll see what happens there. Thank you.
All participants are unmuted.
Then I start repeating or going over it. I'm not arguing with you. That's your job, to spank me when you have to. Not exactly. No, we'll run off. Okay, do we have the floor open yet? So anybody else would like to add anything this evening? Okay, not hearing from anybody. So then tomorrow night we are going to go on the Fifth Amendment on self-convicting yourself. That's the one thing that people need to realize. The Fifth Amendment, keep your mouth shut, period. And once you realize to keep your mouth shut, especially, remember, you're a public servant, a caseworker, CPS worker, cop, district attorney, state attorney general. Those are not your friends unless you have an affidavit and they have to go by the affidavit and they agree to the terms of the affidavit. So if we have nobody who wants to speak up this evening, with that, I'll say, may the Great Spirit look over you. May Mother Earth feed you, protect your family, and may the Creator look over and protect us all. You're supposed to be an adult. Oh, it even goes back to that because they started this after really the Civil War because they've been fighting this on public versus private for years, and that's the one thing that people need to look back in history because when it came back until the internet popped up 10, 15 years ago when it really was more effective than it is, prior to that, people didn't get this education and information out. We were a book. That's why they're trying to shut the internet down because they know people are listening, they know people are reading, they know people are starting to comprehend, they're educating their children. And that's the one thing they don't want you to have proper education, because then they can't control you and you won't do what they tell you to be a slave. And so that is a beautiful opportunity we have with passing this education, especially if you go on new.org and trackers, download the information, save it, utilize it. And, make hard copies if you have to, because at least hard copies are there. Always do a flash drive so you got it in history. But also, too, with the papers, you have it. And you can always use that in the court, too, if you have to. And so it's realizing when you go to court what you can use and what you cannot use. And that is the bigger factor that people need to comprehend. And when you go to court, you want to make sure that you get a judge's certified oath of servitude and his bond. And if you ever end up in Article 3 court, you have to do that. Even in Article 1 court, you want to make sure they have an oath to the Constitution first. So with that, I'll pass it back. Mm-hmm.